hear a little bit about talent attraction. And I would like to thank also Andrew Beer, who all nicely introduced early today the importance of skilled labor. So we make a nice little circle with his final presentation. We also heard a lot about the different locations and the attraction of different locations, city versus suburban versus in the region. And I acknowledge that it's reasonably late for a lot of you. So I would like to finish the day with a short presentation from myself and then showing into the room a bit of ideas of recent developments, and would like to have a little bit of a discussion with all of you what that means actually for science parks or innovation hubs, business parks, and these developments in the future. So I will give you a little bit of a context for everyone who has never heard about Erythropolis. Talent attraction in the 21st century, how we have known it so far when we look at research. Then we know we are all tired of it, but unfortunately COVID is still here and I think very present at the moment again. And I think we all start to realize that that is a game changer. We will maybe, or very likely see massive changes how we work in the future and how we live in the future because of that. So, and then I would like to finish the presentation with a bit of a discussion what that means for actually our business parks we are talking about the whole day, today and tomorrow. So what is an Erythropolis? In short, it is economic development, clusters of different business parks around an airport. So I usually sit between the chairs. People say to me, oh, you're the airport person. I say, well, not really. I'm kind of economic development. Because it doesn't really matter if it's in the airport surrounding, or if we talk business park in Adelaide, or if we talk business park in Japan, or business park somewhere in a region. It gives us some insights into these kind of developments because Erythropolis is very often a greenfield development. As we can see at the moment, we are building in Sydney, brand new airport, brand new Erythropolis, brand new economic development and cluster around it. And the big question is always, how do we make that attractive? How do we get companies to those locations? And as we have learned before, and I think most of us have known that, how do we get the people to the locations? Companies only come if they also find the skilled labor there. So in general, what kind of location factors for companies do we have? We have research of different streams. We agree that physical infrastructure is important, social infrastructure, networking, the business environment, cluster in general, entrepreneurship, but also, and very importantly, the available workforce, especially for high-tech companies, as we can see in innovation in science parks. So we are now in a situation where countries and companies around the world are really competing for talent, so highly skilled labor. And it is an extreme important location factor for companies. All research has shown that for companies, if they can't find the highly skilled labor, the talent, how we call it in some research areas, if we can't find them in the location, it is not an interesting location for companies because it needs that pool of labor available to grow in the future as well. What we found is that these highly skilled labor, these talents, are not driven by money. So just showing money at them, it's not making them come, unfortunately. So how does talent look like in the 21st century? Well, basically like me. I lived in the last 10 years in 4 different countries. I speak 4 different languages, more or less, don't nail me down on that. I value experience over money. I value my work-life balance. And I really look for challenging and interesting opportunities. And that's something we are seeing globally. It doesn't matter the nationality, highly skilled labor at a certain age, and even once they have family and settle down, they're never quite settling down any longer. They're not having any longer that stereotype of sitting in the suburbs, nice little house, 2 cars in front of the house, 2 to 3 children, and never moving again. They have become highly, highly mobile. So what else do they want? They want culturally diverse and very tolerant locations. My research has shown words for came up like it has to be cool and hip. Amenities such nightlife, music scene, cafes and restaurants, just a vibrant environment. We could maybe throw in what has COVID done to that, but my assumption is it's even more important now, probably. They want pleasant built environments, environments where you can walk and cycle and have public transport available and very fast internet connections. So we all knew that before COVID hit already, and it made it already challenging to build greenfield business parks or innovation hubs, locations all over the world, because we have a shortage of skilled labor and they have become highly, highly mobile. I sometimes for fun look at LinkedIn profiles. And when you see in the past, people stayed in jobs like 20 years. Nowadays, it's pretty much 2 years and a few months. The younger generation stays longer than 3 years, it's already a bit odd. They nearly all change every 2 years, the job, and very often the location and the country with it. So even before the pandemic, companies have become more and more footloose. What does that mean? That they were already not so much bound to one location. They were already much more open to work a bit more mobile with having people online, having people flying in, flying out. We have seen digital nomads, especially with entrepreneurs, living out of your suitcase, sitting somewhere on the beach. Well, in Australia, that's reasonably easy. In other countries, you might need to travel for that. And working online was already before a pretty big trend. COVID has accelerated that trend because even the people who haven't been before so mobile have started to question if they want to go to an office every day for the next 20 years. So I took here a few recent newspaper or magazine articles. The Great Resignation has become a huge thing around the world. We are seeing record numbers of resignations in pretty much all developed countries. Job openings are sky high and very hard to fill, especially highly skilled ones. Supply chains are breaking down. I think everyone who's doing economics knows it, that we have an issue right now. We see shift in family patterns because I think everyone who has children in the room has maybe had that experience in the last 2 years of homeschooling and having their children at home and trying to juggling their work as well. That changed a bit the priorities of the parents as well. We have seen moves to the suburbs and even further in the region where it's green and you have space as long as you have an internet connection. And companies offer more and more permanent work from home alternatives. And let's be honest, after everyone has proven for nearly 2 years that that is possible, it's very hard to argue why you have to be in the office if you were able to do that. And in some countries, people have been working at home for more than a year. Right? Even in Australia, if you talk to colleagues from Melbourne, they hadn't been in the office for 8-9 months. Obviously, still they're working. So we see more than 40% of workers globally have resigned and walked away. We are assuming we are seeing some or the social researchers on us, assuming long-lasting social change and a severe shortage of workers. We see people retreating from pre-COVID work patterns. And we get statements like, had started to reconsider my priorities post-COVID and realized I was looking for a less office-bound but more fulfilling life. People have started working remotely even more than before in beachside towns with their families around and started to reprioritize their values in life. Companies start to acknowledge that it's very hard to find highly skilled people, that it's very hard to get them in and even harder to make them stay. And I would like to finish that very short presentation with that very big question: does it change what we offer our talent in the future to make sure that they're still coming to our innovation hubs, to our business parks, and that they stay? Or does it actually mean that we need to reconsider if we are building physical business parks like we did in the past? Can we still build them, but maybe in a different way? Maybe we need less offices, maybe we need more collaboration space where people are just coming in on certain days. But these are questions I would really like to ask all you here in the room and online. What does that mean for us? Because that's something that's just happening right now, this year, with consequences for the near future. Thank you very much.
It's a brilliant presentation with a quick question, because I don't know whether we have any responses to her question. Yep. The two does. Yep. Please.
Hello, Mirjam. I think that is a very insightful presentation and raised a very relevant question. And that's actually the COVID and post-COVID development. And the trend will actually challenge the current or previous model of technology park development. So I actually would like to ask you, and in your view of attracting talent, whether actually the people actually working around the premises for technology park, science park, whether actually the location. And then people want to come here to work, business want to come here to operate, no longer become the most important thing. Particularly consider the certain part of the trend of the COVID will stay and have the impact in the future, and particularly the young generation that people that maybe more kind of prefer the work and life balance and value more about the independence and the value more about how to actually the life rather than actually put the life in the suitcase. So I think actually we don't have the answer, but actually the prompt thinking. But I do want to actually think my point is that most of the science park, technology park development, for me, I have seen that it's more kind of urban planning issue rather than actually nurturing the business and entrepreneurship development. Actually, that actually is more an issue because how it wouldn't be actually translate the benefit and development to the regional economies. I'm particularly think about the regions. That's why my early questions about one very brilliant presentation from the Japanese speaker is that region is bigger than city, but focuses on urban. We need a local in the region. So, that's my take. I believe that actually the challenge how we plan the science technology parks. Maybe we don't really need a park. We come from the clusters into the, so okay, we have the location, we have the parks, but maybe in the future, actually, we could go back to a different form, more kind of virtual form of collaboration, like what we're doing now. We are here, but also we collaborate virtually with people over the Zoom and on the other side of the world. So
yeah, I agree. I think we will see something in between. I think on one hand, people are really hungry for personal connection and looking forward to be able to travel again and seeing their peers and not having just people online. but I don't think people will go back to 9 to 5 every day going to an office. It maybe becomes more like a meeting place where people really, maybe it becomes more like an aerotropolis where people fly in and fly out. And you maybe just have set dates or weeks or where everyone is there and then goes away again and comes back every 3 months or once a week, or I don't know. What are the others thinking?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for all the comments. I don't know whether our online participants and online panelists may have any comments or questions. Kanitaka-san, do you have any comments at the end?
At this moment, no. So please ask others as well. Thank you for.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Okay, thank you for. Sorry. I think yeah. Okay. Yeah, we got some. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a couple of things that come to mind. Picking up on Qixing's point, the idea of remote versus mobile. And what I mean by that, you talked about the fly in and fly out. And my impression, there's probably less interest in flying in and flying out versus being remote of the location you work in. And I think they're different. So that's just a comment and observation. I'd be interested in what others are thinking around that. It's not like we're sitting on a beach in Hawaii this week and I'm going to fly back to Sydney. You can't do that. And the more, now we've got Omicron, and the more this goes on, the more the less attractive now international travel becomes. So the idea of remote versus completely internationally mobile comes into question, in my view, through the pandemic. So that's one thing. The other thing that that I thought would be worth thinking about is we talked about talent attraction, and you have to have talent here to get the companies. With the ecosystems work that I'm currently doing, what that neglects is the interdependencies. You also need the companies to get the talent because they're the ones who employ them. So just standing up as a region and say, we want people here without having the companies is kind of, it's not going to work either. And I think as you move into ecosystems work and thinking about systems, you can't ignore those interdependencies. And so there's not one or the other. It becomes, you need to actually work on both and sort of bring those together. That was the other thing that came to mind. The third thing that actually came to mind is picking up this point around regional development is when we talk about office workers, that is a fairly narrow view, I think, of regional development, because not all our workers are office workers. So if we're talking about the office worker as an approach and science parks as that, there's also other parts of regional development which actually might need to come into play here. And the science park becomes one element of regional development, but it's not all of regional development. That was the other thing that sort of crossed my mind. I don't know whether it's discussion, I don't know. So if you would like to respond, that's okay too.
I just wanted to comment on the first point of flying maybe not so attractive any longer. I think that's, well, as we are seeing just right now, today, countries closing their borders again. I agree. At the moment, I would be very cautious as a company to set it up like this. On the other hand, do we really think that stays like that? Or is it maybe that once that is over, everyone is very happy to do that? Or how long will that anxiety stays that should I leave, should I fly or not? Maybe I get stuck somewhere halfway through. That's a really good question. But I think when we, especially when we develop greenfield developments, we need to think about really long-term and thinking about what that all means for a really important or massive shift in terms of companies and people and how they work together. We see big companies acknowledging that and saying, we are closing our headquarters, we are downsizing, you all work from home and works perfectly. Kevin.
Thank you for the interesting presentation. My question, based on your question to see whether or not it's still important to have aerotropolis, I think it is, because not only the technical skills you require, but also the well-being of the employees as well. You need to be, connected and interact with people, because that's where knowledge or creativity comes in. Because we are talking about knowledge-intensive type of industry, so you need that interaction. And as you can see right now, enough people working from home, they're either lacking some sort of like connection with the fellow employees. That's when the importance of a physical location, the geographical location is important. That's my point of view.
I think it also depends extreme on the industry. When you talk, for example, with software developers, right? For them, they're very happy to work from home, very happy to talk to their peers on Teams or something. Most of them are introverts, right? Very happy to stay at home, works perfectly. They're anywhere the whole day on the computer. Not a problem.
Sorry?
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I'm very happy to see you all in person and not sitting in front of a screen.
Yeah, I think we got one online question. And Kanitaka-san, would you like to ask your question yourself? Or you want me to read your question?
Okay, so I think, this is connected to the previous question, but, because of COVID, global labor mobility has been changed in many ways. And according to your experience, which ecosystem is attracting more talents and which are losing? I think, Japan is a bit in a difficult situation. So I would like to hear more about the Australia situation on your experience.
Sorry, I didn't get the final question.
Do you want me to repeat?
Yeah, I would say a big question, right? I think for the future, it is the ones that are acknowledging that change and planning the physical space maybe in a way where it fits a different lifestyle.
Yeah, just there's the way the question was phrased at the end of the questions, it almost sets up almost a dichotomy there. And it's interesting as we look around, because on the one hand, we look around and we see people rejoicing in the freedom that being unshackled from the office brings. Yet at the same time, we see most employee assistance programs are on the rise in terms of the number of inquiries coming through, the calls through to Lifeline and those sort of services are on the rise that's coming through. So so I think a general statement is we can't make a general statement about that because individuals react differently. And I think your point towards there at the end around, there might be some personality types around, introversion who just like to get on with it, extroverts who really thrive on that social element, who need to find different sort of social outlets or a different way to actually go. Almost links back to that, why do people go to work in the office? Do they enjoy it or do they have to? And I think fundamentally that leads to a redesign to how work is being thought about, and to follow on from Kay, how commercial real estate is being used, how urban environments and cities and regions are being designed, etc. If we round back to Andrew Beer's first slide today, not first slide, but about the fifth or sixth slide, he had a list in there of what are some of those success measures, etc., etc. And I think we could apply those to here. I think the other element in my mind around this is thinking about what is the nature of work? Does routine work where you can get an uninterrupted run lend itself to working from home, or does collaborative work lend itself to being in the office? Or how is that redefined in the future, and how do different companies adopt different strategies towards that? Or if we think in the science park and we go back, I can't remember when it was written, but that fairly seminal article about local buzz or global pipelines, how do we get the local buzz happening around, the water cooler conversations. That's difficult to have over Teams or Zoom. How do we make those happen on a more serendipitous sort of approach, as opposed to a structured, we're going to come in on the fourth Friday of each month, and we're going to work together as a team on the fourth Friday, then we're going to go our way. So I think you're quite right that there is a fundamental shift in how we think about real estate and how people interact with real estate within a science park environment. But equally, I think it's very difficult to make broad generalizations as well around it. I actually think that location is still important, and I think full centralisation into office is a thing of the past, but I don't think that will ever get to a full decentralisation. I think it's what does that hybrid work environment look like?
Yeah, good point.
Okay,
I mean,
probably take the final comment or final questions.
Just like Greg said, the mode of work might be different in the future, and that may be a threat to Metropolis, but probably there are some new opportunities in open innovation, where today there are many fabric labs, maker space, where users goes to a physical place to make their own innovation using technologies like 3D printing. And probably that's might be some kind of new opportunities for innovation parks and even Metropolis.
thank you. Yeah, that's pretty much when we build our entrepreneurship hubs, right? Creating a space where people can come together and then they go back and come back.
I heard there's a lot of this kind of DIY space in Germany and in Berlin in particular. Do you have any, thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, it has been a few years ago in Berlin and Madrid, actually both huge spaces for entrepreneurs. We have a Google campus in Madrid, for example, in Berlin, similar development where people come in, having their peers, having that feeling of connection without having necessarily to rent an office, but having a desk or having pizza nights together and having discussions together and having coffee together, because a lot of people don't want to work from home the whole week, but they also don't want to be the whole week in the office. Right? And this having no peers at all where you get feedback, people find that very often difficult. And when you talk to entrepreneurs, they also value that having that exchange and this nurturing exchange, but then they want to have that freedom as well to say, today, half a day I go to the beach, or I work from home, or if you have international collaborations, right, you find yourself very often sitting at midnight and having a meeting, then you don't want to be at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. in an office the next day. Okay, I think I'm handing over to Ryan with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pretty much that we have a very good discussion today. I know we still get one question not answered, but we have to close today's session because we have a limited time in this one.